All right, sweet. I'm going to set this up.
You want me to make you a root beer float while you're...
If you want, yeah. Stay seated where you are for a second, because I want to see. Look at that. There you are. So you don't have to look at that. Like,
No, I won't.
we can just talk to each other, but I just want to make sure it's, yeah, covering both of us. Okay. Technology.
Let me get those candles out of the way.
Yeah, maybe. I can take them off. I can set them aside. Thank you.
Yeah. This one will
Oh,
tip over because it's busted.
this is, the recording is mostly so I can go back and get
Sure.
any information
Okay.
that I don't write down while you talk.
Okay. Do you want to?
We can maybe do that after.
All right.
Yep. And don't worry about that. We'll forget about it. I just want to make sure we're both on. All right. Here we go. First one's easy. Just your name, when you were born, where you were born. Yeah, and you can just start out with that.
Okay. My name is Julie Van Worst. I was born May 27, 1934 in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Are your parents from Grand Rapids too?
Yes, they are.
Were they, so they were born here?
They were, both of them.
Wow. So they're your parents' parents.
Were not born here.
What was their story? If you their story that you know.
Yeah. My dad's father was born in Michigan, but I'm not sure where. My dad's mother was born in Staphorst, Netherlands, in 1880. My grandpa was born in 1882. He was 2 years younger than Grandma. They were married in Grand Rapids. My grandma came over from the Netherlands when she was 2 years old.
Oh wow, so she was really young. So how much Dutch language, cultural heritage was in your home growing up? Being that you're basically like 3 generations.
Sure.
Kind of removed from
My parents' grandparents all spoke Dutch, but my parents only spoke Dutch in the home when they didn't want us to understand, because they went to a private Christian school. My folks both went to the same school,
Okay.
where the first 3 years were taught in Dutch. This was such a Dutch community. So all the people my parents' age, even though they were American born, kind of knew Dutch.
3 years.
Yeah, the first 3 years of school was all Dutch. And I think they still had Dutch services in their churches. My folks kind of grew up with that. In fact, my mother's father was instrumental in starting a new Christian Reformed church that would have English services when my mother was a child.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So when you were growing up, did your immediate community feel, I mean, very homogenous in the sense of everyone you were connected with was basically Dutch,
Yes.
Christian Reformed? Um,
Some were reformed. That was a little less.
do you know when the church split? The Reformed and the Christian Reformed?
In 1834.
Okay.
I would dare say for sure.
Okay. So it had been split for some time, but it was still.
I think the biggest difference with all that when I was a child growing up was that one of the differences is that the Reformed Church people did not send their children to the Christian schools. And the Christian Reformed people did all send their children. If they didn't, they were a little bit ostracized. I can remember really feeling that in my church, that the kids, there were families in my church who were very faithful in their attendance, good people, went to church twice a Sunday, but those men never got in counsel because they did not send their children to the Christian school.
Really?
And those kids who went to the public school, just a little less.
Yeah. Interesting.
Was. And my parents were careful about that. I would say that my parents were quite gracious people, and they didn't like that kind of stuff. So they didn't talk about that. But you sure always had that feeling that, well, they go to public school, or they go to the Reformed church. I really lived in a Dutch bubble.
Yeah.
Almost all our neighbors were Dutch background.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to school as a child, I remember that a lot of the kids in my classes and so had grandparents living with them who spoke just Dutch.
Yeah.
It's very familiar sound to me to hear Dutch.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned men in council of the church. Was it very much a patriarchal community that you remember?
I would say so.
I mean, even beyond the church?
Yeah, I would say. I lived in a block of probably about 20 houses. It was a long block, houses on both sides of the street.
Do you remember what street?
Martindale. And no, I thought about that the other day. No women had jobs outside the home. Every mother was home all day, every day. And I don't think there might have been one woman down the street who drove a car, but otherwise none of our mothers drove, and nobody had two cars. I mean, that was out of the questions. Just had one car per family, and the man took the car to work. Is that?
Is that more financial or more that it would look too materialistic and greedy? Or maybe just a mix of both?
I think it was just the culture. I mean, my mother had a good job as a private secretary to the president of a small company when she married my dad. She had gone to business college.
Okay.
She was a whiz at typing in shorthand. But the day she was going to get married, she had to quit her job and just stay home. That's what you did. You got married, you stayed home and raised a family.
And was there even a conversation about stopping work, or was it just all assumed?
I think it was all assumed. Married women did not work.
How rare was it that your mother had a post-secondary degree?
Yeah,
in that time?
I think that was somewhat rare. Her parents had money. My grandpa was a businessman. He owned a grocery store for years.
So this is 1910s, 20s?
My folks were married in 28.
Okay.
So it would be in the early to mid-20s.
Okay.
And my mother went to high school, to Christian High. I think the first year it was organized, and she went a year and a half, and then she transferred over to Davenport McLaughlin. They always said it was the forerunner of Davenport College.
Oh, really?
And then she went there and took all her business courses, bookkeeping and that kind of stuff.
I didn't know Davenport had that much of a history
Yeah.
in the city.
It was Davenport dash McLaughlin. They always said McLaughlin. I think my dad took some courses there too. And yeah, so I think a lot of my mother's friends didn't do that. A lot of them worked at the Keebler Company, sort of cookie factory and that.
On 28th there by.
Well, it used to be on Granville Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Right in the neighborhood. My friends, my grandparents were very good friends of the Heckmans, who started Heckman Biscuit, which became Keebler. And they lived on the corner, and they started by selling cookies out of a wheelbarrow when my mother was a child. Built it up, you know. That's part of that same tribe. Yeah. And I think that my mom, she had a pretty easy bringing up because she was one girl with three brothers, and my dad always said he remembered that my mother's family was one of the first in the area to get a car and that kind of thing. He always thought of my mother's family as being rich. I don't know that they were rich, but they were better off than a lot of people. So my mother did go on to school a little bit and got a job as a secretary and that kind of thing.
Wow. So 1920s, your mom and dad meet, they get married, she stops her work, she's now a wife and mother, or a domestic mother,
Yeah,
whatever you call it.
Already, what did you do? Because they didn't have a child for over 2 years. I said, what did you do all that time? She said, she kind of rolled her eyes. I cleaned my house. I cleaned my house twice a week so thoroughly that I got on my hands and knees and dusted the mop boards in the closets, she said, because she had nothing to do.
Yeah. So these other homes on Martindale and the women in these homes, while their husbands are at work, thinking about those 2 years for your mom, would they get together and have tea or?
I don't think they did that very much.
No?
No, she had my parents had a parsonage right next door to them because there was a basement church across the street. They didn't have enough money to put a superstructure up yet. And that minister and his wife had children already. And my mother became quite close to that minister's wife.
Okay.
She was kind of my mom's mentor and advisor and that kind of thing. But yeah, if I think my mother did a lot of walking. She walked to the stores, which were half a mile away, and it was a different era. But then the year after my parents got married came the crash, 1929. And of course, she didn't work. But she said we did everything we could to hang on to our house. And so many of their friends lost their homes. My parents had built their little house when they got married. And they had gone together a long time. And my dad saved enough money to make a down payment on a house. And my mother saved enough money to buy the furniture. And then they got married.
Does the house still exist?
Yeah, my sister married us. Bought it. My parents lived in it till they died.
Where is Martindale?
It's between Chicago Drive and Burton in Wyoming. Well, I'm sure you've been there already as a little kid, but you don't know when my parents were living. So
They built it.
they built it.
Wow.
And then when my mother got put in a home, she had she was ill, and my dad stayed there. He stayed there till he died. So then we all got a little chunk of the money, and one of the twins bought us all out and bought the house.
Was that area part of Grand Rapids at the time, or was Wyoming in existence?
Wyoming wasn't called anything. It was just when they built their house, which is now a Spanish ghetto. It is. They had no paved street, no sidewalks, no street lights, no fire protection. And people said, why do you want to build way out in the country? Well, now it's
Very urban. Yeah. And a large Hispanic community. Yeah. Yeah.
But my sister Mary and Paul, they love it. They're staying there.
Good.
We got a lot of different kind of neighbors, but they do well with it. So they feel very sentimental about the house.
Yeah.
So
tell me about growing up on Martindale then. Obviously you grew up there if your dad lived in it your whole life.
sure.
What are your memories of?
Very good. We had across the street a field because it was church property. They were going to build a church, and then they built a new parsonage on that property, which is all still there.
Mhm.
And then behind us was the high school.
Oh,
And
yeah.
And the playground with the swings and everything was right behind our backyard. So we didn't have a lot of close neighbors because we had a school behind and a church across the street.
Yeah.
And we had a nice neighborhood full of kids, and everybody's mom was home, and we all played together, and we played in the schoolyard a lot and roller skated around that high school, and it was a charmed growing like Leave It to Beaver, just everybody was happy and nobody fought.
Did you see your mother interact more with the people in the neighborhood as you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
playing with kids and growing up?
Women all got along well together. A lot of strict rules because everybody was strict. And then the little church across the street, whose parsonage at that time was next door to our house,
Yeah.
very close.
Yeah.
A new minister came from New Jersey with 5 boys, and they were full of spit and vinegar. And the minister's wife, she always said things like golly and gosh, and all the women were going, because we weren't allowed to use those words at all. And here the new minister's wife was saying those words.
Using them.
Yeah. That's the neighborhood a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What about neighborhood get-togethers and dinners, or maybe a block party?
No, didn't ever do that. Never.
So if you were to invite someone into your home, who would that be?
Probably people who were our friends, like from church or
Okay.
school friends. And we always had a lot of people coming in and out of our house, but they weren't neighbors. I thought of that because next door to my folks on the other side, those people built their house at the same time, and they also stayed there till they died and raised their family there. And I can't ever remember that woman being in our house.
Wow.
They'd speak in the backyard over the fence, my mother and Dora. They would talk together.
Mhm.
Dora had a hose with water in their garden, and my mother would be in the back. And they were on good terms.
Yeah.
They just didn't do that.
Yeah.
We went to different churches. So
What were the rules like within your house? Curfew,
yeah,
dinner rules, homework rules, reading the Bible rules. I don't know.
Yeah.
What were the standards set
we always
at Martindale?
read a story from the story Bible, not the reader Bible, but the storybook Bible at dinner at night. And of course, always had prayer before and after meals.
Was it kind of lively at dinner and talkative, or yeah?
We had a very good family life. I had an older brother and 3 younger sisters. So, Daddy, it was good. I really don't have any bad memories of growing up, except that my mom had twins when she was 40, and I think that was a very unexpected thing in the family. First of all, to have a pregnancy at 40 and 42, my dad was, and then have twins and not know it was twins until one was born.
Wow.
So that put my mother in a tailspin. And I was 12, so I remember those years shortly after that as not great because I had to help so much, and my mom was tired and she was crabby and sometimes kind of weepy.
She's probably exhausted.
She was. We didn't have automatic washers then, you know, had to wash in the basement and hang it all in the backyard. And those were kind of hard years, but I don't know, I was always happy, had friends, and so, but it was a big highlight for me was when I turned 12, I got a bicycle. You couldn't get bikes during the war.
Oh.
And yeah, that's
So how old were you then when World War II
broke out.
so, yeah, started?
1941, and I was born in
Well,
34, so I was 7.
41 Pearl Harbor, but 39 Hitler invades Poland.
Yeah, see, I didn't know. We didn't know.
Even as oh really?
I mean, my dad probably did, but you know, you didn't have television.
Yeah. So like Pearl Harbor, and then it's like, oh, we're in a war. But before that, everything was kind of.
Pearl Harbor was on a Sunday afternoon, and I was, like I say, what, 7, and my mother was sitting in the living room, and she was crying, and you hate to see your parents cry.
Right.
And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "We are at war." And they were listening to Roosevelt speak, this kind of thing, you know. And I felt really bad, but then I felt so safe because I thought we're so far away, they can't attack us. We got the ocean between us, and which was kind of true, not totally. I mean, I know there were German subs off the East Coast, but we never knew that. I never knew that as a kid. Now maybe my dad did. He followed all the news pretty well. It was always we had the daily paper, and there was always a map in the paper showing where the Germans were, you know, and we could kind of follow that map and follow where the battles were going on. Wow. And my dad watched that. And then later they started in one of the downtown movie theaters, which was totally taboo for us. They turned one into a newsreel theater. It's called Photo News. And they ran an hour-long movie for a whole week, every hour. So you could go anytime and sit in there, watch it for an hour, and you'd see a whole newsreel. And my dad sometimes took my brother and me on Saturday night to Photo News. And that is what really got me interested in the war, because it was so vivid. We had never really seen movies, you know, and I remember so well the first time I went, it showed a picture in Poland, and there was an old peasant lady with a bandana with a child sitting against a haystack, and they were both dead. And that really got to me. I had never seen anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
So then we went every Saturday night, and we got familiar with the faces of all the famous German generals like Goering and all those guys. I knew what they all looked like because they'd be in those movies, and I just ate it up, you know. And then that was good when the war ended too, because then we got to see him hang some of those people. There was a close-up of Goering where he had bitten the bullet.
Yeah.
He was dead. We were so glad, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your dad was maybe a little bit too old for the draft?
Just a little too old for the draft.
Okay.
I had 2 uncles in Gary. One who stayed. My dad's youngest brother was 17 years younger than my dad, but he was a clerk typist, and he stayed in Texas the whole time. He did not have to go overseas. And then my mother's brother was a dentist, and he got drafted, and he went to the Philippines. And we were all very impressed because he did dentistry in the back of a truck. He brought us all little souvenirs. We came home, stuff made out of parachutes and all. But yeah, I remember that all vividly because we had so many people that we knew. I mean, church.
Yeah, so you were 7 in 41 when it broke out. But
12 by the
yeah,
time it was done.
yeah, well, yeah, okay. Do you remember your dad's view of Roosevelt and maybe Truman at the end of the war? And
they liked him.
uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Did political discussion come up at home, or was that not really discussed?
My dad was a Republican, and in those days, most people, if you were Christian Reformed Dutchman, you were a Republican. There were always a few Democrats, and everybody knew who they were because that was unusual. Yeah, he's a Democrat, you know. But,
so that's still kind of like that.
Yeah, although it's people can't discuss
Maybe
it.
less so.
I think people could discuss it a little better in those days without getting mad at each other, you know.
Huh.
And then during the war, we could buy defense bonds. That was a big thing. Well, when you went to school every Tuesday, we could buy defense stamps. You had a little booklet, and you paid 10 cents a stamp.
Okay.
And then you had to fill that booklet, and then you got a certain number of booklets, and that was $18.75 worth. And then you got a war bond. Maybe the war bond was worth $18.75. And if you kept it 10 years, it would be worth $25. And we just thought that was wonderful. So we all saved money, and every Tuesday there'd be a line up to our teacher's desk. And she'd have sheets of these defense stamps. We'd have to give her our dimes, and then we put them in the book.
Really?
Oh man, and some kids could buy 5 of them, 50 cents worth. I thought your parents must be so rich. No.
So you could see a sense of service then during the war from even the younger kids.
We were very patriotic, and everybody had somebody in whom they knew, somebody in the Army. We had a boy in our class who was an absolute hero because he had 2 brothers in the Army. He was the youngest he was our hero. And it struck me when you kids were young and when you draw dinosaurs, when boys draw pictures. But when I was a little kid and a little bit bigger kid, they all drew airplanes. They knew every kind of warplane. This is a P-38. This is a B-39 or something, or B-37, and then the big super fortress came. They called it the Flying Fortress.
Flying Fortress.
Was it a B-52?
B-52 bomber.
Sure. And then they knew how to draw those and all the details. And if a boy had a crush on you, he'd draw you a nice picture.
Here's some planes. Go out with me. Oh, okay. Here's some planes and some candy. Yeah. Oh, it's funny. It's good.
But we had air raids in school.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it was every week. We had to line up, sit down. I went to an old wooden school. We had to line up in the hall and sit against the walls and put our head in our hands like this. And then we had to sing, "Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you." We did sing that, the whole school.
Really?
And the principal would talk to us a little bit and have a prayer. But I never really worried because I thought nobody will ever bomb us,
Yeah, we got the whole Atlantic.
Yeah. But now Auntie Evie, she lived in North Carolina.
Oh,
And we
okay.
talked about that the other day. And she said, well, we always had blackouts at night. She said, we had to pull all our shades down. All the street lights were out at night. She said, because they were closer to the coast.
People on the West Coast.
Sure.
Fuel probably as well.
Oh yeah, and you had little stickers that went into the right-hand side of your windshield. And they were about like this. And if you had an A on that sticker, black background with a white capital A, then you could get a certain amount of gas. If you had a B, you could get more. And that would be like doctors who had to go to the hospitals,
Yeah.
But everybody had those stickers in their windshield, I remember. And you could only get a certain amount of gas. And people were careful. I mean, they said, well, we can't do that because of gas rationing. You can't go here or there because we don't get enough gas for that.
Would you say there was a general consensus by Americans to support those government interventions and programs? We're going to put an A on your car, we're going to label you a B, and you're going to do this. And people said,
everybody was, that's where I noticed the difference with the wars today, because everybody was patriotic in World War II. My country tis of thee, and
Americans today couldn't name where soldiers are.
It was perfectly, I've talked about this with Evie too. It was perfectly legitimate and acceptable to hate the Germans and hate the Japs, as we called them.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought they were less than human.
Yeah.
And it was perfectly, nobody condemned you if you said bad things about them. Now we don't do that. I mean, we realize they're all people and this and that. But even when Grandpa and I lived in the Netherlands for 2.5 years, I did not want to go to Germany. Just
had this
bad feeling
built in your mind of
sure.
Germans in World War II.
Germans.
Yeah. Huh.
Oh.
Was there anyone in your Christian community who challenged some of that tone?
Mm-hmm. And we had, every church had a service flag in it. And it would be a big rectangular flag, maybe, this by this. And it would hang like over the organ pipes right in the front of church. And it had a big red border. And then the inside was white. And starting with the top, they would sew a star in for every boy who went to the service from our church. I think we had 54 stars, and every one was they knew whose star was whose. And we had 4 gold ones. We had 4 boys killed from our church. And that was always very earth-shaking when that happened.
Yeah.
They'd have a big memorial service in the church, and I was too young to go, but my parents always went, and my mother would tell me about it. And then usually the family of the deceased would give some kind of a memorial to the church, like a new pulpit chair or something like that, in memory of their son who died. And that was really tough. I mean, I was from a big church, but everybody knew everybody, and it shook everybody up when that would happen. So you felt very much a part of the war.
Yeah.
There was no really what everybody talked about was the war. That's all we ever talked about. The parents, and they visit in the evenings and just talk about the war.
It's better than nonstop discussion about the president.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And everybody was on the same page about the war.
The unity must have been
very good.
Just very impressive and uplifting.
Mm-hmm. It was our war.
Yeah.
Sure. Also, we're talking. I'll be sitting around the living room by this big console radio with this little speaker in it, and listening. I didn't always feel all that because I was young.
Yeah.
My parents did.
Uh-huh.
My dad followed it.
So in maybe this World War II moment, but even beyond that, just growing up, who did you look up to as a kid? Or just a teenager and someone growing up?
Teachers, pretty much. And of course, you thought that time that you're a minister was right under God.
Who do you remember, or do you remember anyone besides teachers being very influential on your life?
Well, musicians, of course. I was huge into music.
Okay. Were you listening to vinyl records?
Yeah, you couldn't get very many during the war. That's the thing that kind of stimulated me. With my uncle, the dentist, had to go to the army. They had to break up housekeeping, move out. And she went and lived with him on the army base for a while till he went overseas. And so their furniture kind of went to relatives to keep it during the war. And they had they had more money than we did because he was a dentist. And they had a wonderful hi-fi. And they had.
I don't know, what's a hi-fi?
Oh, that was kind of the newest thing in records.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
And they had a big one with a big speaker, and they had some classical records. And they blew me away. I loved them so much. And, they were just with a needle and 78s.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon they got really smart and they got 33s that went slower so they could get more on a record and stuff. But,
okay.
That was big influence on me.
So tell me a little bit about after high school then, and you're out on your own, you're in school.
Well, this is what happened.
Or what was that journey?
I was all my life going to be an RN. That was I never thought of anything. I'm going to be a nurse. Well, I met Grandpa when I was only 16 in high school, and he was a freshman at Calvin, and we just got forced.
Swooping on the young ones.
Yeah, we got forced together. I didn't really want to do it, and he didn't really want to do it, but we had relatives who thought it'd be so cute to have John and June have a date. Well, that was it. I mean, we just fell so hard for each other. And so when I was a senior in high school, I was going with John, and John was by that time going to be a junior at Calvin. And my dad was a smart guy. He sat me down one night and he said, "So, no, you're going to graduate. Yeah. So you think you're going to be a nurse? Yeah. You're going to have to start applying at nursing schools." Yeah. Well, he said, that it costs a lot of money. I said, yeah. And he said, I don't have it. So you're going to have to borrow money if you go to a nursing school. And if you don't borrow it from me, you're going to have to borrow it where you have to pay interest. And then you're going to get through nursing school and you'll have a debt to pay back with interest. So you think you're going to marry John? I said, yep. And he said, he's going to be a minister. Yeah. He looked at me and he said, ministers' wives cannot work. He was right. No minister's wife had a job. He said, you're going to go through nursing school. You're going to get married. John won't have any money. You have to pay back your debt. And as soon as he's done, you can't work. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought, well, I'll go to Calvin. And at that time, you could take a 2-year teaching course. There was such a teacher shortage that you could go 2 years and get a certificate to teach elementary. So I thought I'll do that. Well, I had a job between my junior and senior year in high school in the hospital. And it was a good job. We just got to do so much. It was 6 weeks training for it. I worked at St. Mary's and I loved it so much. And I was working that summer then. And I thought, I'm not going to be a teacher. I don't want to be an elementary teacher. I want to work in the hospital. That's what I want to do. So I went to community college and they had a 1-year nursing program. And the guy said to me, it's fall for this fall when I finished high school. But he said, I'll give you a test. If you pass that test, I'll squeeze you in. And I did. And they squeezed me in.
Nice.
So I took a 1-year nursing course at community college, and it was really great for what I
I
needed.
think you showed me a picture of you
Yeah, probably.
maybe after graduation. You got a little
Yeah.
nursing hat on, and yeah, maybe it was a diploma thing
It was a diploma
from the
and
course.
state boards,
Yeah,
and I did have state board and all that kind of stuff. And there was just a nursing shortage that really the only things I couldn't do would be couldn't do meds, couldn't pass meds, couldn't work in surgery. But as far as bedside nursing care, did the same as all the RNs.
yeah,
And we were a big help to the RNs because there weren't enough of them, you know.
right.
So that's what I did. And then I worked in the hospitals. And then my uncle, who was a dentist, was, back from the army and all established, and he was a dentist in Granville. And this was before I got married then, and his assistant, every dentist had just one assistant, and she had a nervous breakdown. So he had to get a new assistant. So I called him up and I said, that looks kind of good to me. He said, yeah, that looks kind of good to me too. So I started working for him, and I worked for him for 3 years in a dental office. And at that time, you did all the assisting at the chair side. You made all the appointments, did everything for the guy, sterilized the instruments and all that kind of stuff. So I did that for 3 years. And then Grandpa was ready to, we were married, and in the first year after we were married, he was allowed to stay in Grand Rapids in the summer instead of serve a church somewhere as a seminarian, because they had more seminarians than they did churches. They said he had to preach every Sunday, and he did. Then the second year, after he finished the second year of seminary, they said, now you have to take a church. So I talked about it with my uncle, and he said, well, it's like cutting off my right arm. I can't give you 10 weeks off. So I had to quit. But the nursing shortage was still so bad that I went down to St. Mary's when I found out I was going to, because then he started thinking right away about hiring another person.
Yeah.
So he did, and he got somebody a couple months yet before I was ready to go on that summer assignment with Dad. So I went down to St. Mary's, and the nursing director, I talked to her, and I said, I need a job for 2 months. And I said, then I need 3 months off, and then I'll come back again in the fall. And she said, can you start tomorrow? That's how the job market was then.
Wow.
So that's what I did. And then I worked almost till son John was born. And then Grandpa was almost through seminary by that time. So he was through seminary.
Wow.
Just done. John was born the day after Grandpa's last exam in seminary. So that's what I did.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's good.
It's really good.
Yeah, I got a good life. And it was very true. No ministers' wives work now. They've all got their own careers and everything else, but they did at that time.
Yeah.
And I talked about this with Grandpa when he was still, we could discuss things. I said, do you know what you said to me when you took a church, your first church as a pastor? I said, you said to me, you know how you can best help me? This is exact quote. I said, no. He said, keep the home fires burning and keep your mouth shut.
Grandpa.
Yeah. And then when I told him this a few years ago, then he thought a minute and he said, really? I said, yeah. And he thought a minute and he said, but it was pretty good advice, wasn't it? I said, it was. It was.
Yeah.
But it's so different from today.
Yeah.
A minister's wife can do her own thing, but not then. So.
Or a minister's husband.
There you go. I mean, I think of Kyle. It's gotta be hard, raising kids.
Yeah, I think he's doing a really good job. But I think he knows, I think Rebecca maybe hasn't said that to him. Keep the home fires burning and keep your mouth shut. But I think Kyle's very concerned about Pastor Rebecca's position and does not want to do anything to harm that in any way. But also is very, warm and wants to have conversations, and we'll get together and
Really nice guy.
yeah.
But it's just you can't compare what ministry is like at our church with what it was like when Grandpa was serving a church. It's apples and oranges. It's so different today that he was the only pastor and he did everything.
Yeah.
Everything. He was never home. Never home. He told me once, he said, I have to say I don't really remember anything about Ann being a baby. I said, no, I'm sure you don't because you're never there.
Yeah.
So all those changes are not all bad. But that's my life, and I had a good life. I really did. I have no regrets. I have no, I wish I could have. Or, no, I think everything worked out just fine for me, for what I needed, and it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. It was very good.
Sounds like it. Thank you for taking the time.
Sure.
I guess I'll pause right now. Maybe we can do root beer floats.
Okay.
I might think of some more questions to ask too as I digest. There's so many roads I want to go down.
Part of the reason my life was so wonderful, which I really feel has been, is because I married Grandpa and all the opportunities that we had, which were just marvelous, really.